Welcome. Today I'd like to start this video in recapturing some of the essence of the application. So as you'll see, we've got the New Canada Life branding. Gets me very excited that we've got everything now in the new light as we progress into 2020. So with that, I'll do just a quick 5-minute video here. We'll go through some of the ins and outs of the application, so you get a good sense of what it is we're looking for in terms of an underwriting guideline. Okay, so just on page 1 here, we really have the simplicity that you would expect. We're looking for basic client details, information, what the address is. Key things to remember here would be your fax number, probably not required, but everything else in there is really important. The work phone, cell phone, email, marital status, social insurance number. I always like to remind people that we can't ask them explicitly for that anymore. They're willing to provide it most times, but we can't ask them for that. Birth date, pretty simple on here. And then we've got the applicant address. So the address is very important. Keep in mind we're looking for 3 years, both on the address and the employment, which I'll touch on the next page. And with that, there's really 2 lines here to make sure that you've got both of those covered. So what we're looking for address is just the full address, your city, the postal code, all of those things are important. They have to go into the online application anyway, so be cognizant of that if you're filling it out. And again, just a reminder, 3 years is what we're looking for. So the applicant's employment, here on the bottom, you'll see the employment details. What we're looking for a salaried employee is going to be whether full-time or part-time or seasonal. Those things should be evident. A work phone is generally required. Not a lot of excuses why they wouldn't have one. Then we're looking for the occupation, position, and the time at job and the years in the industry. So this the final line here, a lot of good pieces right there that we need in terms of information in order to make our decision. And then the income amount, and that's the one that I would say is probably the toughest when we're looking at qualifying. It's really understanding what is meant by the income. So if you're salaried and you have a straight income coming through, then that's fine. It's going to be what your last 2 pay stubs have generally indicated. Where it gets a little trickier is if you're self-employed and maybe you've had 5 years in the business. We're going to look at the last 3 years and try to come together with an average and see what you're able to sustain, because of course when you're walking out the door with a mortgage, we want to make sure that your affordability is in check and we're not putting you in a tough position down the road. Okay, so with that, again, looking for 3 years on the employment and making sure that you've covered that. There are multiple boxes. So now we're on page 2. You'll see if you haven't been at your first employer for 3 years, you can definitely put those same details here. And be as thorough as possible. It really can't be understated. We're coming back to clients if it's not. So it's a good opportunity to really get some of those details fixed. Okay, and then from there, still staying on the second page, we're going to want to do the net worth sheet. So the big thing here is I'll just touch on liabilities. When we're pulling a credit report, there really is not going to be a whole lot for you to add on here except maybe a mortgage, because those don't show up on credit reports. Otherwise, everything's going to be on here when we scrape that over from Equifax. The big thing is the assets. That we do need for you to provide, whether it's RSPs, tax-free savings accounts, bank accounts, existing properties, and a vehicle. Those are the ones that typically will come up on every application. So we want to see them there very well indicated, especially if an asset's going to offset a liability, because the objective is to see what people are worth at the end of the day. All right, and with that, if we're talking pre-approval, we're pretty well okay with those 2 pages. On the 3rd page, we're just going to want to know some of the particulars on the mortgage that you would be looking for. That could be your interest rate, it could be some of the payment terms. It'll be important to put that on here. So there wouldn't really be any requirement to put the subject property or some of these property details because you don't have a house yet. So with that, when we're talking about a pre-approval, we would just need the income. So 2 years typically with pay stubs, or 3 years if you're self-employed with supporting financials, and then your assets. And we're looking for 90 days because the government requires us to make sure that we understand where the down payment funds are coming from. So the onus is really on us to support that. And so that's going to be important for the first 3 pages. I'll quickly touch on the acknowledgement. So this is a 4-page document, and essentially what we're looking for here is that the clients consent to us pulling their credit bureau. That's really the main essence of this form. And what we're going to want are initials down here on the page 1. If they're joint, we're going to want 2 initials. We're going to want initials here on page 2, and making sure that they're ticking, saying that they want a joint disclosure together. And here, very simply, we're asking them if they are potentially ahead of any associations where they could be susceptible to bribes. Obviously, with money laundering guidelines, we want to be cognizant of this. And then you just want to add the ID in here. Make sure you get the expiry date, and then you can sign as the witness, or I'm willing to sign as the witness, as long as you say that these clients are known to you. One of us can sign here, and that's fine. And then the last page is where your clients are going to be putting their names and signing, and then I'll put my details back here as the specialist, and that's the acknowledgement. Okay, so simple enough. Very important form. Just want to cover that because I do get some questions. The next one is going to be the pre-authorized debit form. So this is a form that allows us to make those payments for their mortgage. So we want to support this with a void check, and then these details just auto-populate. But the big thing is make sure that the client sign and date this form. Really non-negotiable. Okay, and then finally, we've got the mortgage life insurance application. So the big one here is people will tell me that they don't want life insurance, and so they don't bother with this form. Thing is, we have a waiver down here that says, and I'll read it out to you, I understand the benefits available under this policy and decline to apply for coverage at this time. I'm aware that I can apply at a later date by contacting the Mortgage Servicing Center at 1-800 number. And the reason we're very particular about this section is, as you can appreciate, some people may come in and act for both spouses. Then all of a sudden something happens where maybe that spouse will pass away. If the other spouse was unknowing that the mortgage insurance had not been taken but offered, you could see how this could present a legal issue. So by having them both sign and date, even if they're not taking it, because I will admit that we do have some products that can be put in place for a cheaper amount, term coverage, for example. This is something that you should be talking to your clients with. And with that, the pages 2 and 3 wouldn't need to be required. So there you have it. That's pretty much the application in a nutshell. Just a quick overview in 7 minutes. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to have a chat, and I can show you how we can partner better.